Billionaire sees bruise on black candy girl's face, calls police immediately after learning the truth. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The snow fell lightly across the city streets, a soft blanket over the chaos of the world. The wind whispered through the trees, but no one seemed to notice. On the corner of Fifth Avenue, a little girl stood with a cardboard sign in her hands. Her shoes were worn, the soles peeling, and her clothes were too big for her tiny frame. The bruise on her cheek stood out starkly against her dark skin, a mark of something far deeper than a simple fall. Her eyes, though, told a different story. Empty, lost, and yet somehow still hopeful. She had been standing there for hours, quietly, waiting for someone to notice her. The few pedestrians who passed by gave her a wide berth, averting their eyes, as if afraid of what they might see. But one man, a billionaire, saw her. He had been walking down the street, his mind consumed by business calls, his eyes scanning the horizon for any hint of the next deal, when something made him stop. The little girl caught his attention, not because of her small frame or ragged clothes, but because of the way she held herself. There was something in her demeanor that made him pause. The bruise on her face stood out like a warning sign, and before he knew it, he was standing in front of her. He knelt down, his expensive shoes scraping the icy sidewalk, and looked her in the eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. The girl flinched, pulling her sign tighter to her chest. "I'm fine," she whispered, but the tremble in her voice betrayed her. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way she seemed to shrink under his gaze. The billionaire knew there was more to the story, but he didn't press her. Instead, he asked her name. "Jada," she whispered. Jada. The name echoed in his mind. It reminded him of someone, but he couldn't place it. He looked around at the people who had passed by, each one oblivious to her pain, each one too busy to notice the little girl standing in the cold. It wasn't right. He knew that. But what could he do? Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police," he said, his voice suddenly cold, serious. Jada's eyes widened, and she shook her head. "Please, no. I don't want to go to a shelter," she begged. But the billionaire was already dialing. He couldn't just walk away. Not this time. Not with the bruise on her face. Not with the fear in her eyes. He had to make sure she was safe. The call was brief, and soon enough, a squad car pulled up to the curb. The officers stepped out, their faces neutral, but the billionaire could see the way they took in the scene. One of the officers approached Jada, his expression softening as he asked her to come with them. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. As they drove away, the billionaire stood there, watching, his heart heavy with guilt. He hadn't planned for any of this, but he knew one thing for sure. He would make sure this little girl was never forgotten. This was just the beginning. The squad car took Jada to the local shelter, a place that looked more like a hospital than a home. The officers were kind but distant, guiding her through the door with the gentle push of a hand on her shoulder. The billionaire stood outside, watching them disappear into the building. The street was eerily quiet now, the snow still falling, but it felt as though the world had shifted somehow. He hadn't meant to get involved, but now that he had, he couldn't walk away. Something about the girl had gotten under his skin. He couldn't shake the image of her small, bruised face and the desperation in her eyes. He had seen it before, in his own reflection years ago, in a time when he too had been a child in need of help. But this was different. Jada wasn't his responsibility. Or was she? He shook his head, trying to push the thought away, but it lingered, like a ghost haunting him. He turned and walked back to his car, his mind racing. He had to know more. The next morning, he drove to the shelter. He wasn't sure why, maybe to check on her, maybe to make sure she was safe. But when he arrived, something in the air told him it wasn't just curiosity driving him anymore. There was a pull inside, an undeniable need to make sure she was okay. As he stepped into the building, the smell of antiseptic and loneliness filled his nostrils. The receptionist looked up, her expression neutral, but the moment she saw him, she seemed to recognize him. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice a little too loud in the otherwise quiet room. You're here to see the girl, aren't you? He nodded. Yes, he said. Jada, right? The receptionist's face softened, and she motioned for him to follow her. She led him down a narrow hallway, the walls lined with worn-out chairs and faded photographs of children who had once lived here. At the end of the hall, she stopped in front of a door and knocked gently. Jada, you have a visitor, she called softly. The door opened, and there stood Jada, her eyes wide with surprise. Her clothes were fresh, but the bruise on her face was still there, a dark reminder of the pain she had endured. She looked up at him, unsure of what to say. He took a step forward, offering her a gentle smile. Hi, Jada, he said softly. How are you feeling? She shrugged, her gaze dropping to the floor. I'm okay, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I guess. The billionaire felt a pang of guilt. He could see the wall she had built around herself, the wall she had put up to protect herself from the world. He had seen that same look in the mirror so many times, the look of someone who had learned to survive by shutting others out. He didn't know how to help her, but he knew he couldn't just leave her here. He had to try. I'm not going to force you to talk, Jada, he said. But I want you to know that I'm here if you need someone. I know what it's like to feel like you're all alone. But you don't have to be alone anymore. She looked up at him then, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. For a moment, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes, but it quickly disappeared. She had learned not to trust people, not to believe in promises that were too good to be true. I don't need anyone, she said, her voice hardening. I'm used to taking care of myself. The billionaire nodded, respecting her need for space. I understand, he said. But if you change your mind, I'm here. He turned to leave, but before he could step away, Jada called out to him. Wait, she said, her voice cracking. He turned back to face her, surprised by the sudden vulnerability in her tone. You really mean it? She asked, her eyes searching his face for any sign that he was just another person making empty promises. You'll help me? The billionaire's heart clenched at the desperation in her voice. He stepped closer to her, his voice firm with conviction. I'll help you, Jada. No matter what. Jada's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, trying to maintain her composure. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I've never had anyone like you before. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, the gesture soft but grounding. You don't have to know what to do, he said. I'm here to help you figure it out. You don't have to do this alone anymore. For the first time since he met her, Jada smiled. It was a small smile, but it was there, a crack in the armor she had built around herself. And in that moment, the billionaire knew that he wasn't walking away from her. He was going to be there for her, no matter what it took. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. The days after the visit to the shelter blurred together for Jada, but one thing remained constant, the quiet presence of Mr. Caldwell. At first, she wasn't sure what to make of him. He wasn't like the people she had known before. People who made promises only to break them, who said they cared but never really did. But Mr. Caldwell was different. He kept showing up, always gentle, always steady. He didn't pressure her to talk about her past or what had happened to her. He just showed up, and that, in itself, was something she had never experienced before. After a week of quiet visits, he asked her if she wanted to come to his house for the weekend. She hesitated. The thought of leaving the shelter made her nervous. She had been here long enough to know that the world outside wasn't a kind place, and she didn't want to face it alone. But Mr. Caldwell had been kind, and she didn't want to disappoint him. With a deep breath, she said yes. When they arrived at his home, she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The house was huge, so much bigger than anything she had ever seen. The polished floors gleamed, and the air smelled of fresh flowers and something she couldn't name. It felt like a different world, a world she didn't belong to. Mr. Caldwell noticed her hesitation and smiled. You don't have to worry, Jada, he said. This is your home now, too, if you want it to be. Those words were more than she could handle at the time. A part of her wanted to believe him, but another part of her screamed in fear. She had learned long ago not to trust people who promised too much. But there was something in his voice that made her think. Maybe, just maybe, he meant it. The weekend passed in a haze of new experiences. Jada got her first real meal in days, a warm bowl of spaghetti that made her stomach rumble with hunger. She took a long, hot shower, something she hadn't done in months. And she slept in a soft bed, the first real bed she had ever slept in. In the mornings, she woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and pancakes. It was like living in a dream. But at night, when the world grew quiet, the fear crept back in. She couldn't forget her past, and she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this life, this kindness, was too good to be true. She wasn't used to this, being treated with care, being given things without having to beg for them. It felt wrong, like a lie she was too afraid to uncover. On the third day of her stay, Mr. Caldwell sat down next to her at the kitchen table. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her carefully. "Jada," he finally said, his voice gentle but firm. "I know you're scared, but you don't have to be." She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You're not alone anymore," he said softly. "You've got people who care about you now. I care about you. You don't have to hide or be afraid anymore." Her breath caught in her throat. His words made her feel things she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope, trust, and something more, the possibility of belonging. It was a dangerous feeling, one that could lead to disappointment, to loss. But in that moment, she let herself believe. She let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, Mr. Caldwell was telling the truth. That night, as she lay in the soft bed, staring at the ceiling, she thought about all the things Mr. Caldwell had said. She thought about the kindness he had shown her, about the warmth of the house, and about the possibility of a life where she didn't have to be afraid all the time. But even as she let herself dream, a part of her kept warning her not to get too comfortable. Life had a way of taking everything from you, and it wasn't safe to believe in people who hadn't proven themselves. She turned over in bed, hugging the blanket tightly around her. She wanted to trust Mr. Caldwell, but she couldn't let herself believe too fully. Not yet. The next day, Mr. Caldwell asked if she wanted to go out with him. He didn't say where, just that it would be something fun. Jada was hesitant, but she agreed. They drove through the city in his black SUV, the streets bustling with activity. Mr. Caldwell didn't ask her to talk, didn't push her to tell him everything. He simply shared a few stories from his own life, stories of times when he had felt lost, when he had felt like no one cared. He made her laugh, and for a few hours, it felt like everything might be okay. When they pulled up to a park, Jada saw a group of children playing soccer, their laughter filling the air. She felt a pang in her chest. She used to play soccer when she was younger, back when her life had been simpler, back before everything had changed. Mr. Caldwell must have seen the look in her eyes because he got out of the car and walked over to the field. He returned with a soccer ball, tossing it to her. "You're still good, right?" he asked with a smile. Jada hesitated for a moment, but then something inside her shifted. She nodded and kicked the ball into the air. It felt freeing, like a weight had been lifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to enjoy the moment. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be different. The rest of the day passed in a blur of laughter and fun, but even as she smiled, a part of her couldn't shake the fear that had been with her for so long. Could she really let herself be happy again? Could she trust this man who had shown her so much kindness? She didn't know the answers to those questions, but for now, she let herself feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. The days following the park visit felt like a dream to Jada. Every morning, she woke up in the soft bed Mr. Caldwell had given her, feeling the warmth of the sunlight streaming through the curtains. For the first time in years, she didn't wake up cold or scared. But that peace, the safety she was starting to feel, was fragile. Every time she looked at Mr. Caldwell, every time he showed her another kindness, she couldn't help but wonder, could this really be real? Could she truly trust him, or would it all come crashing down as it had before? One morning, as they sat down for breakfast in his large kitchen, Mr. Caldwell asked her something that made her heart stop. "Jada, can you tell me more about your mom?" he asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. The question hung in the air, and for a moment, Jada didn't know how to respond. The silence between them stretched, and she looked down at her plate, her hands tightening around the fork in her hand. Her mother, the one person who had always been there for her, who had promised her that everything would be okay. But that promise had been broken when her mother had passed away. She could still hear her mother's voice in her head, feel her hands brushing her hair, and see her smile. But now, that smile was gone. The pain from losing her was still fresh, as if it had happened only yesterday. Jada started, her voice faltering. She was sick. Really sick. Mr. Caldwell didn't push her. He simply nodded, waiting for her to continue when she was ready. And then, without thinking, Jada began to talk. She was always there for me, you know, she said, her voice quieter now, as if sharing this memory made it hurt less. Even when things got really bad, when we didn't have enough food, when we were cold, she always told me that we'd be okay. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away, trying to stay strong. But she got really sick, and there was nothing we could do. The doctors couldn't help, and then one day, Jada's voice cracked, and she stopped. Mr. Caldwell reached out and gently placed his hand on hers, a silent offer of support. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to bring up painful memories." But Jada shook her head. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've been holding it in for so long. I never really talked about it to anyone. I didn't want to feel weak." Mr. Caldwell's heart ached for her. He could see how much she had been through, how much she had endured alone. He wished he could take all that pain away, but he knew that wasn't possible. All he could do was offer her his support, his presence, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. "You're not weak, Jada," he said, his voice firm and full of conviction. "You're one of the strongest people I know, and you don't have to carry all of this by yourself anymore." Jada looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and hope. Could she really believe him? Could she trust that someone would actually stick around, that someone would care enough to help her through this? For so long, she had been on her own, dealing with everything by herself. She wasn't used to relying on anyone, and even now, part of her wanted to pull back, to protect herself from getting hurt again. But another part of her, the part that still remembered the joy she felt when she was with him at the park, the part that had smiled, for the first time in what felt like forever, wanted to believe, wanted to trust that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The next few days passed slowly, but with each passing moment, Jada felt herself letting go of the walls she had built around her. She wasn't there yet. She still had a lot of fears and doubts, but little by little, she allowed herself to feel the warmth of Mr. Caldwell's kindness. She helped him in the kitchen, setting the table or cleaning up after meals. They talked about their favorite books, their favorite movies, and sometimes they just sat in silence, enjoying each other's company. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. And then one afternoon, everything changed. Mr. Caldwell took her out for a walk in the park again, but this time, they weren't alone. A woman was waiting for them when they arrived, sitting on one of the benches, watching the children play nearby. She was older than Jada, with dark hair and a kind smile, but there was something about her that made Jada feel nervous. Mr. Caldwell introduced her as his sister, Claire. "She's the one who's been helping me figure out what to do next," he explained. "I thought it might be good for you to meet her." Jada felt her stomach tighten at the thought of meeting someone new. She had always been wary of new people, especially adults who seemed too kind, too eager to get involved. But Mr. Caldwell seemed so comfortable around his sister, and that made Jada want to try. Claire stood up and extended her hand. "It's so nice to finally meet you, Jada," she said, her voice warm. Jada hesitated, but then, after a long pause, she took Claire's hand. "Nice to meet you," she said, her voice small but steady. For the rest of the afternoon, they all sat together, watching the kids play, talking about the weather, and sharing stories. Jada didn't feel like she had to say anything or be anything other than herself. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged somewhere. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found something worth holding on to. The next few weeks at Mr. Caldwell's house began to feel like a new chapter for Jada. Every morning was a new beginning, filled with routines she had never known, warm breakfast, quiet walks, and time spent with Mr. Caldwell and his sister, Claire. It was strange, living in a home where the doors were always open, where there was always someone willing to listen, and most of all, where she was not alone. But still, doubts lingered in the back of her mind. Could this really last? Could this kindness be real? She had learned long ago that nothing ever lasted, especially for someone like her. Mr. Caldwell noticed her silence one afternoon as they sat together in the living room. He was reading a book, and she was sketching in her notebook, but he could tell she wasn't focused. "What's on your mind, Jada?" he asked, his voice soft but insistent. She looked up at him, caught off guard. "I'm fine," she said quickly, but her voice betrayed her, cracking slightly. He closed the book and set it aside, giving her his full attention. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said. "I can see something's bothering you." Jada hesitated. She hadn't wanted to talk about it. She didn't want to admit that part of her still couldn't believe in this life, in the safety that was being offered to her. "I just don't know if I'm ready," she finally confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ready for what?" Mr. Caldwell asked, his brow furrowing. "Ready to trust. To be happy, I guess." She let out a shaky breath, her fingers drawing circles on the edge of the page in front of her. "It's hard to believe that this is real. That you're real." Mr. Caldwell's expression softened, and he moved closer to her. "I understand," he said quietly. "It's not easy to let go of the past, especially when you've been hurt. But I'm here, Jada, and I'm not going anywhere. This isn't some dream that will vanish." His words were steady, and for the first time, Jada believed them. She wanted to believe them. "I don't want to get hurt again," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to let myself hope for something, just to have it ripped away." Mr. Caldwell nodded, his eyes kind and full of understanding. "You don't have to do it all at once," he said gently. "You can take your time. And if you ever feel scared or unsure, I'll be here. You're not alone in this." Jada's heart softened, the walls she had built around herself starting to crack. It wasn't easy for her to let down her guard, but something in his voice made her feel safe. Maybe, just maybe, she could let herself believe in the possibility of happiness again. Over the next few days, Jada began to feel more at ease. She spent more time in the kitchen with Claire, learning how to bake cookies and make simple meals. She went on long walks with Mr. Caldwell, getting to know the neighborhood, and even started going to the local library, something she had always wanted to do but never had the chance. Life was becoming a little more normal, a little more hopeful. But even with these small steps forward, Jada still couldn't shake the fear that lingered in the back of her mind. One afternoon, as they were sitting in the garden, Mr. Caldwell turned to her with a serious expression. "Jada, I've been thinking," he began. "I think it's time for you to start school again." Jada froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "School?" she echoed, feeling a wave of panic rise inside her. The thought of going back to school, of facing all those strangers, was terrifying. "I don't know if I can do that," she admitted, her voice shaky. "What if they don't like me? What if they laugh at me?" Mr. Caldwell smiled gently, the warmth in his eyes reassuring. "You don't have to worry about that. I've already made arrangements with the local school. They're expecting you." "But I'm not like the other kids," Jada said, looking down at her shoes, feeling small and out of place. "I don't fit in." Mr. Caldwell's smile faded, and he leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You don't need to fit in, Jada. You just need to be yourself. That's enough." Jada wasn't sure she believed him. She had always felt like an outsider, like she was different from everyone else. But his words stayed with her, and as the days passed, she found herself thinking about them. Maybe, just maybe, she could be herself, and that would be enough. The day of her first day at school arrived, and Jada felt a mix of excitement and terror. She woke up early, her heart racing as she got dressed in the new clothes Mr. Caldwell had bought her. She looked at herself in the mirror, unsure of who she was seeing. The girl staring back at her was someone she didn't quite recognize. A girl who was no longer living in fear, no longer hiding in the shadows. She was someone who deserved to be happy. When Mr. Caldwell drove her to school, he didn't say much, but his presence was comforting. "You'll do great," he said, his voice soft but full of encouragement. Jada nodded, though her stomach was in knots. When they arrived at the school, she felt like she was walking into another world. The large brick building loomed in front of her, and she felt small and out of place. Mr. Caldwell gave her a reassuring smile before walking her to the entrance. "I'll be here when school's over, okay?" he said. Jada nodded, trying to hide her nerves. As she walked into the school, her heart pounded in her chest. But she kept walking, one step at a time. Maybe she was ready for this after all. Maybe she could finally start living the life she had always dreamed of. The first few days of school were harder than Jada had anticipated. She had expected the transition to be difficult, but the overwhelming sense of isolation was something she hadn't prepared for. When she first stepped into her new class, the whispers started almost immediately. Some of the other kids stared, some giggled, and Jada could feel their eyes on her, judging her from head to toe. She kept her head down, clutching her backpack tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to disappear, to retreat into herself like she had always done before. but she forced herself to take a deep breath and sit down at the desk that had been assigned to her. She tried to remind herself that this was a fresh start, a chance for something better. But the stares, the whispers, and the feeling of being different were hard to shake. During lunch, she sat alone, picking at her food. She could hear the laughter of the other kids in the cafeteria, the conversations that didn't include her. She missed her old life, the days when she didn't have to face these uncomfortable situations, when she didn't feel like she was always on the outside looking in. Mr. Caldwell had been right when he said she didn't need to fit in, but the truth was, she wanted to. She wanted to belong. She wanted to be seen. But she also knew that wanting it didn't make it happen. At recess, she watched the other kids play soccer, their laughter filling the air. She remembered the day at the park when she had kicked the ball with Mr. Caldwell. It felt like a lifetime ago. She had been so carefree then, so happy. She missed that feeling, but she didn't know how to get it back. As she stood there, lost in her thoughts, a girl walked up to her. She had blonde hair and bright blue eyes, a big smile on her face. "Hi, I'm Emma," she said, her voice friendly. "Are you new here?" Jada hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, I just started." Emma smiled and sat down next to her. "You're really good at soccer, right? I saw you at the park the other day." Jada blinked, surprised. She hadn't realized anyone had noticed her that day. Yeah," she said softly. "I used to play a lot when I was younger." Emma's smile grew wider. "You should come play with us sometime. You look like you know what you're doing." Jada felt a small flutter of hope in her chest. "Maybe," she said, trying to hide the hesitation in her voice. Emma gave her a playful nudge. "Come on, I'm sure you're better than me. I'm terrible at soccer." Jada couldn't help but smile at Emma's enthusiasm. Maybe it wasn't so bad to give this a try. Maybe, just maybe, she could start making a real connection with someone. After a few more minutes of small talk, Emma stood up and offered her hand. "Come on, let's go play. You can teach me some tricks." Jada stood up slowly, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but there was something in Emma's kindness that made her feel a little more comfortable. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. The next day, Jada found herself walking toward the soccer field during recess. Emma waved at her from the sidelines, a bright smile on her face. Jada hesitated for a moment before walking over. She had spent so many years keeping to herself, afraid of what others might think. But Emma made it easy to push those fears aside, even if just for a little while. As they started playing, Jada felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. The ball rolled toward her, and without thinking, she kicked it, sending it soaring toward the goal. The kids on the sidelines cheered, and for the first time in a long time, Jada felt a spark of pride. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was part of something. After the game, Emma walked over to her, her face flushed from running. "That was awesome. You're really good at this," she said. Jada smiled shyly. "Thanks," she replied. "It's been a while since I played." "Well, you should definitely play more often," Emma said, her voice full of excitement. "We need someone like you on our team." Jada's heart swelled with something she hadn't felt in a long time, belonging. She wasn't sure if this was the start of a new friendship or just a one-time thing, but for the first time since she arrived at this new school, she felt like she was part of something real. As the weeks went by, Jada found herself becoming more comfortable with the other kids. She started to feel less like an outsider and more like someone who could be accepted. She ate lunch with Emma and a few other kids, laughing and joking like they had known each other for years. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. It wasn't just about fitting in anymore. It was about finding her place, her voice. And she had started to realize that maybe, just maybe, she had found it. At home, things were still going well with Mr. Caldwell. He continued to be a steady presence in her life, offering her the support and love she never thought she deserved. He encouraged her to keep pushing forward, to keep trying, even when things got tough. One night, as they sat down for dinner, Mr. Caldwell asked her how school was going. Jada smiled, feeling the warmth of the food in front of her and the comfort of being with someone who cared. "It's going well," she said, her voice a little stronger than before. "I'm starting to make some friends." Mr. Caldwell's eyes lit up. "I'm proud of you, Jada. I knew you could do it." She smiled at him, feeling a rush of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. And for the first time in a long time, Jada allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this new life of hers was worth holding on to. The days that followed Jada's newfound confidence at school felt like a step forward, but the shadows of her past continued to linger, just out of sight. She had started to enjoy her time with the other kids more, especially Emma, but there were moments, quiet, solitary moments, when she still felt the sting of being different. And no matter how much she told herself she was doing okay, a part of her still couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It was a late afternoon when Mr. Caldwell mentioned it casually, but the words hit Jada like a brick wall. "I've been thinking about your dad, Jada," he said while they were sitting in the living room together. The mention of her father was a rare occurrence, and Jada felt her stomach twist. "What about him?" she asked quietly, trying to hide the discomfort in her voice. Mr. Caldwell, noticing the tension in her posture, gave her a small, reassuring smile. "I don't want to push you to talk about him if you're not ready," he said gently. "But I think you deserve to know more about your family, your past. I don't think your father would have wanted you to grow up thinking he didn't care." Jada's heart skipped a beat. She had avoided thinking about her father for as long as she could. After her mother died, her father had disappeared, vanished from her life with nothing but a few broken promises and unspoken words. She had never gotten answers, only silence. But the thought of finally getting some closure, some answers, felt like a weight on her chest. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it. "I don't know if I want to know," she whispered, staring at the floor, her fingers nervously tapping on the edge of her notebook. "What if he doesn't want me? What if I was just a mistake to him?" Mr. Caldwell's expression softened as he reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. "No one ever deserves to feel that way," he said. "And it's not about what he thinks, it's about you knowing your truth. You deserve that, Jada. You deserve to understand who you are." Jada bit her lip, her mind swirling with emotions she couldn't control. She had spent so many years angry at her father, resenting him for not being there, for leaving her to fend for herself after her mother's death. But the idea that there could be more to the story, that maybe he hadn't abandoned her on purpose, unsettled her. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear it. But Mr. Caldwell was right. She did deserve to know. "Okay," Jada said finally, her voice trembling. "Okay, I'll do it." The next day, Mr. Caldwell arranged a meeting with a private investigator. He didn't tell Jada much about what they would be looking into, just that they needed to find out more about her father. Jada's nerves flared as they sat in a small office across from the investigator, a man in his 40s with short cropped hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. The office was cramped, papers stacked high on every surface, and the low hum of a fan in the corner only added to the tension in the air. Jada felt like she was suffocating. "What do you know about your father?" the investigator asked, flipping through a file on his desk. Jada hesitated. "I don't know much," she said quietly. "I know his name, Michael Walker, and that he left after my mom died. I don't remember much about him, really. I remember him leaving." The investigator nodded, scribbling down some notes. "I see. Well, we'll see what we can find. It might take a while, but we'll start with whatever information we have." Jada felt a strange mix of emotions as the investigator spoke. Part of her wanted to know the truth, wanted to understand what had happened to her father. But another part of her was terrified of what they might uncover. What if he really didn't care about her? What if he had abandoned her completely? What if the truth was too painful to bear? "We'll find him, Jada," Mr. Caldwell said, noticing the uncertainty in her eyes. "Whatever happens, you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." The investigator's search took several weeks. Jada tried to focus on school, on the friendships she was slowly building, but her mind often drifted to the unknown. What was her father doing? Where was he? Did he even know she was alive? The questions haunted her, and she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something important was just out of her reach. Then one afternoon, the phone call came. Mr. Caldwell was in his office when he picked up the phone. Jada, sitting in the kitchen, heard his voice rise in pitch, a mix of surprise and disbelief. "Are you sure?" he asked. "You've confirmed the address?" There was a long pause as the investigator spoke on the other end. Jada's heart began to race. "I see," Mr. Caldwell said quietly before hanging up the phone. He walked into the kitchen, his face unreadable. "Jada," he said softly, his voice almost apologetic. "We found him." Jada's stomach dropped. The moment she had been dreading had finally arrived. "What does that mean?" she asked, barely able to breathe. "It means," Mr. Caldwell said slowly, "that he's alive. And he's been living in the city, just a few miles away." Jada couldn't process what she was hearing. For all these years, she had believed her father was gone. Gone forever, just like her mother. But now, here he was, alive and nearby. It felt like a dream, one she didn't know whether to wake up from or embrace. "What do I do now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You decide," Mr. Caldwell said, his tone gentle but firm. "This is your journey, Jada. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But the choice is yours." Jada sat in stunned silence, the weight of her decision sinking in. She could feel the walls around her heart start to shift, the truth beginning to surface. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever the truth was, she wasn't facing it alone. She had Mr. Caldwell by her side, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The decision to meet her father was the hardest thing Jada had ever done. After weeks of thinking about it, about her father's sudden reappearance in her life, the nervousness and fear were overwhelming. She had spent so many years convincing herself that he was gone for good, that she didn't need him, that he didn't care about her. But now, the reality of seeing him was right in front of her. Jada had spent the last few days in a whirlwind of emotions, unsure of what would happen when she finally faced him. Mr. Caldwell had made it clear that she didn't have to do this if she wasn't ready. But there was a part of her that felt like this was the only way to close the chapter of her past. She couldn't move forward without knowing the truth. It was an early morning when they drove to the address the investigator had found. Jada could feel the knot in her stomach tighten as they approached the house. It wasn't what she had imagined. It wasn't a grand mansion or a lavish home. Instead, it was a small, run-down house on a quiet street. The paint was peeling, the lawn was overgrown, and the house looked like it hadn't been cared for in years. Jada's heart sank. Was this really the place? This couldn't be where her father had been living all these years. Mr. Caldwell must have seen the look on her face because he reached over and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Jada," he said softly, "I know this is hard, but you're doing the right thing. You're taking control of your story." Jada nodded, swallowing hard. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What if he doesn't even want to see me?" "You don't know that for sure," Mr. Caldwell said. "But you'll never know unless you try. And I'll be here, no matter what happens." Jada took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had come this far. She couldn't turn back now. Together, they walked up to the front door. Jada hesitated for a moment before knocking. The sound echoed in the quiet morning, and her heart raced faster. After what felt like an eternity, the door creaked open. A man in his late 40s stood there, looking at them with wide, confused eyes. He was tall, with graying hair, and his face was weathered, like someone who had lived a hard life. But it was him. It was her father. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice rough but polite. Jada's throat tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, words failed her. Mr. Caldwell stepped forward, offering a friendly smile. "We're here to speak with Michael Walker," he said calmly. The man's eyes widened even more. "I'm Michael. What is this about?" Jada took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice shaking. "I'm Jada, your daughter." The man blinked, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. "What?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "I said," Jada repeated, her voice stronger now, "I'm Jada. I'm your daughter." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Michael stood there, motionless, staring at her as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Finally, he took a step back, his expression softening. "Jada," he whispered, almost to himself. I didn't know you were alive." Jada felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Anger, sadness, relief, and even a little bit of hope. She had spent years wondering if he even cared, if he had thought about her at all. And now, here he was, standing in front of her, looking just as lost as she felt. "You left me," Jada said, her voice tight with emotion. "You left me and my mom when we needed you. I thought you didn't care." Michael closed his eyes, a pained expression crossing his face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice raw. "I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't know how to be anything, really. I was lost." Jada felt a flicker of something inside her. Was it forgiveness? Or just the recognition that this man, her father, was just as broken as she was? "Why didn't you come back?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you try to find me?" Michael shook his head, his hands trembling. I didn't know where to start. I thought about you every day, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out. I thought you were better off without me. Jada wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt her, how much she had suffered because of his absence. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood there, feeling the weight of everything she had carried for so long. I don't know what to do with all of this, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can forgive you. Michael's face fell, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if he understood. I don't expect you to, he said quietly. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm here now, and if you'll let me, I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Jada felt a mixture of anger and sadness wash over her. Could she really let him into her life again? Could she trust him after all these years? I don't know, she said softly, turning to Mr. Caldwell, who had been standing quietly behind her the whole time. Mr. Caldwell gave her a gentle smile, his presence reassuring. This is your decision, Jada, he said. You don't have to forgive him right now. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But whatever you choose, I'm here for you. Jada took a deep breath and looked at her father. I need time, she said, her voice steady. I need time to figure out what this all means. Michael nodded, his eyes filled with regret. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Jada nodded slowly, her heart heavy with uncertainty. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control of her own story. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. And for now, that was enough. The days after meeting her father felt like they were stuck in slow motion for Jada. She had taken the first step toward confronting the past, but the weight of the encounter hung heavy on her heart. She knew she needed time, but what time would bring, whether healing or more hurt, was uncertain. Her father's apology, the quiet regret in his eyes, still echoed in her mind. Could she ever trust him again? Could she forgive him for everything he missed in her life? She didn't know, and that uncertainty gnawed at her, pulling her in different directions. Mr. Caldwell noticed the change in her, the way she had retreated into herself after that day. Her smiles were less frequent, her conversations shorter, and the light that had started to return to her eyes seemed to fade. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Mr. Caldwell looked over at Jada. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the yard. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that made everything feel a little too heavy. Jada, Mr. Caldwell said softly, I know you're still processing everything, but you don't have to do it alone. I'm here, whatever you need. Jada looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. But the truth was, she wasn't sure what she needed. I don't know if I can forgive him, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way again. I've spent so many years thinking he was gone for good. Mr. Caldwell nodded, his expression understanding but firm. You don't have to forgive him now, Jada. And you don't have to have all the answers. But you're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling. Don't rush yourself. Just take it one step at a time. Jada nodded, trying to let his words settle in her heart. She had always been so quick to put on a brave face, to hide her emotions from the world. But now, she realized that it was okay to not have everything figured out. She wasn't in a race to heal. She just needed to find her own pace, her own path. The following days were filled with small moments of reflection and quiet contemplation. Jada spent time in the garden, sitting beneath the old oak tree that Mr. Caldwell had told her had been planted long before they moved in. It became her place of peace, a quiet refuge where she could think without the pressure of expectations. One afternoon, as she sat there with her sketchbook, she felt the soft crunch of gravel beneath her feet. She looked up to see Claire walking toward her, her smile warm but concerned. How's it going, kiddo? Claire asked, sitting down beside her. Jada shrugged, her fingers tracing the edge of her sketchbook. I don't know, she said softly. It's just, everything feels so complicated. I thought meeting him would give me the answers I needed, but now I just feel more lost. Claire nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. It's okay to feel lost. You've been carrying this for so long. It's going to take time for everything to settle. Jada looked at her, a small sigh escaping her lips. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive him. I don't know if I can ever get back what we lost. Claire placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You don't have to get it all back, Jada. Sometimes, the past is something you have to leave behind, not fix or get back. But you can still move forward. You're not defined by what's happened to you. Jada looked up at her, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. She had never thought of it that way. You're stronger than you think, Jada. And you have a family now, Claire continued, her voice steady and comforting. You have people who care about you. People who will help you move forward, no matter what happens with your dad. The words settled in Jada's heart like seeds being planted in fertile soil. She wasn't alone. She had a family now. A family that would be there for her, even if her father couldn't be. After that conversation, something shifted inside Jada. It wasn't an immediate change, but slowly, she began to let go of the anger and resentment she had carried for so long. She started to focus on what was in front of her, rather than what had been left behind. She was still unsure of how to navigate her relationship with her father, but she knew that she didn't need to have all the answers right now. What mattered was the present, the people who were here for her, who were trying to help her build a new future. A few weeks later, Jada met with her father again. This time, it wasn't the tense, awkward meeting it had been before. They sat together at a small cafe near Mr. Caldwell's house, the air filled with the hum of conversations and clinking cups. Jada felt a nervous flutter in her chest, but it was different this time. She wasn't carrying the same weight of expectation. She was simply there, taking it one step at a time. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Jada began, her voice steady but soft. And I don't know what forgiveness looks like yet. I don't know if I can forgive you for everything. But I also know that I don't want to keep holding on to all this anger. I don't want to let it control me anymore. Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with something close to relief. I don't expect you to forgive me, Jada. I don't deserve it. But I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me. Jada felt the knot in her chest loosen. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It wasn't about fixing everything in one conversation. It was about taking the first steps toward healing. I'm willing to try, she said softly. But I need time. I need to figure out what that looks like. Her father nodded, his face filled with gratitude. I understand. I'll be here when you're ready. Jada smiled, a small but meaningful gesture. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was moving forward. Slowly, yes, but with purpose. And that, for now, was enough. The weeks after Jada's meeting with her father were filled with more questions than answers, but slowly, they started to become more manageable. She had begun to accept that healing wasn't an instant process. It was a series of small steps, some forward, some backward, but always moving. Her father reached out to her every week, never pushing, just offering his support. At first, the contact was minimal, but as the days went by, she found herself feeling less guarded, less afraid of the idea of him being in her life again. One afternoon, while sitting in the living room with Mr. Caldwell, Jada's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw her father's name. For a moment, she hesitated. The past few weeks had been so peaceful, and the thought of reopening old wounds, even with him, made her uneasy. But Mr. Caldwell, noticing her pause, smiled gently. You don't have to pick up if you're not ready, he said. But I know you've been thinking about him. Jada nodded, her fingers trembling slightly. I have. I'm not sure what to say. Whatever you feel, Jada, it's okay, Mr. Caldwell reassured her. Just take your time. You're in control of this. With a deep breath, Jada answered the call. Hello, she said, her voice quiet. Hey, Jada. Her father's voice came through, soft and tentative. It's me. There was a long pause, and then he continued. I know things aren't perfect, and I know I've hurt you, but I just wanted to say that I'm here. I want to be here for you. If you're ready, maybe we can try to talk more, spend some time together? Jada felt a lump form in her throat. She had imagined this moment countless times, and yet hearing it out loud felt different, more real. I don't know if I'm ready yet, she said. Honestly, her voice trembling. I'm still trying to figure out what I want from all of this. Her father's response was gentle, understanding. I get it. I don't expect anything from you, Jada. I just want you to know that I'm here when you're ready. No pressure. Just take your time. Jada sat in silence for a moment, processing his words. There was so much she didn't understand, so much that still hurt, but at least for the first time in a long while, she wasn't alone in it. I'll think about it, she said finally, feeling the weight of the decision settle inside her. And maybe, when I'm ready, we can talk again. I'll be waiting, her father said softly before they said their goodbyes. As she hung up the phone, Jada felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. She wasn't sure where this would all lead, but for the first time, she felt a tiny flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild what had been broken. Over the next few days, Jada found herself reflecting more on her father's words. It was strange, allowing herself to think about the possibility of forgiveness, of healing. But she realized that, like Mr. Caldwell had told her, she didn't have to have all the answers right now. She just needed to be true to herself, take the time she needed. Meanwhile, school had been going well. The kids in her class had warmed up to her more, and Emma continued to be a steady friend, someone Jada could talk to without feeling judged. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. On one of those quiet evenings, as she sat in the kitchen helping Claire make dinner, Jada found herself thinking about what Mr. Caldwell had said before. You don't have to forgive him right now. You don't have to have all the answers. But you're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling. It was okay to be confused. It was okay to feel conflicted. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to have everything figured out today. As the days turned into weeks, Jada and her father's relationship remained in limbo, but the distance between them was shrinking. She agreed to meet him for coffee one afternoon at a small cafe near her school. The meeting was tentative, quiet, but not without its small moments of connection. Jada found herself laughing at one of her father's awkward jokes, a part of her surprised by how easily it came. After that, they began to meet more often. The meetings were slow and steady, one conversation at a time, but it was enough. She started to see a side of him she hadn't known before. The man who had struggled with his own mistakes, his own regrets. The man who was trying, even if it was too late. She wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but she was learning to accept that maybe there was room for him in her life, just as there was room for her to grow. One afternoon, while walking through the park together, Jada looked at her father, her thoughts running through her mind like a storm. I don't know if I'll ever forget what happened, she said, her voice steady but thoughtful. But I think I can start to forgive you. I think I can let you be part of my life again. Her father looked at her, a look of gratitude and relief washing over his face. Thank you, Jada, he said, his voice filled with emotion. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm grateful you're giving me a chance. The walk ended quietly, but Jada felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. It wasn't perfect, and there were still many unanswered questions, but it was a start. It was enough. And for the first time, Jada felt like she was beginning to truly heal. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer walking it alone. She had a family now, Mr. Caldwell, Claire, and even her father, in his own way. And that was enough to give her hope for the future. The weeks following Jada's decision to forgive her father were filled with small, but significant steps. Each day, she felt a little more at peace with herself, a little less burdened by the anger and sadness that had once weighed her down. It wasn't a perfect road. There were still moments when the past crept into her mind, and she wondered if she had made the right choice. But with each day, she learned to trust herself more, to trust the process. She began to feel like she was living, really living, rather than merely surviving. The school year had just begun, and for the first time in a long time, Jada was looking forward to it. She had been making real friends, people who accepted her for who she was, and she felt like she belonged. Emma had been a constant support, and Jada was finally starting to feel like she had a place at school. Her confidence had grown, and she was no longer the quiet, isolated girl she had once been. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Jada looked over at Mr. Caldwell. He had been her rock throughout all of this, steady, patient, always there when she needed him. She didn't know where she would be without him. Mr. Caldwell, she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. I don't know how I would have gotten through all of this without you. He turned toward her, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You don't need to thank me, Jada, he said. You've done the hard work yourself. I've just been here to help you when you needed it. But you're the one who found the strength to move forward. Jada smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. It was true. She had found the strength within herself, but he had been the one who showed her it was possible to find it. Still, she said, I'm really grateful. As the days passed, things began to settle into a new normal. Her relationship with her father was still in the early stages, but they were communicating more. They had shared a few more awkward but meaningful conversations, each one helping them build something new, something that had been lost long ago. It was slow, but it was progress. Jada had learned that healing wasn't a linear process, and she had to give herself grace. There would be setbacks, But there would also be moments of joy, like the one she had experienced when she realized how much she had grown. One evening, Mr. Caldwell invited Jada to dinner at a small local restaurant. She had been feeling restless, uncertain about the next steps in her life. But when they sat down at the table, something felt different. She felt more open, more willing to embrace the future. As they ate, Mr. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "How do you feel about your dad now, Jada?" he asked, his voice gentle. Jada hesitated, taking a deep breath before answering. "I'm still figuring it out," she said honestly. "I know it's going to take time, but I'm starting to understand that it's not about waiting for him to fix everything. It's about me choosing how I want to move forward, with or without him." Mr. Caldwell nodded, his expression approving. "That's a powerful realization, Jada. You don't need anyone else's permission to move forward. You're the one in control of your life now." The words settled in her heart, and for the first time, Jada realized that she had taken ownership of her own future. She was no longer waiting for anyone to tell her what to do or how to feel. She had the power to shape her own path. After dinner, as they walked back to the car, Jada felt lighter, freer than she had in a long time. The weight of her past was still there, but it no longer defined her. She had come so far, and the future, though uncertain, felt full of possibilities. The next day, she decided to visit her father again. It wasn't a huge step, but it was a step towards something that had felt impossible just months ago. She wasn't sure what she expected from the visit, but she knew that it was time to face him again. When she arrived at his house, she was greeted by the same familiar feeling of uncertainty, but this time it was different. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. She knocked on the door, and this time, when he opened it, there was no hesitation. He stepped aside, letting her in. "Jada," he said softly, "I'm glad you came." She smiled faintly. "I'm glad, too." They sat down together, and for the first time, Jada didn't feel the weight of her past hovering over them. She was no longer defined by the pain of her childhood. She was defined by who she was now, by the strength she had found within herself. "I've been thinking a lot about us," Jada said, her voice steady. "And I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you completely. But I think I'm ready to start building something new. I think I'm ready to let you back into my life." Her father's eyes softened, filled with gratitude. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Jada, but I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I'm here for you, no matter what." Jada nodded slowly, her heart still heavy but lighter than it had been before. "I know you don't deserve it, but I think I'm finally starting to forgive you. And that's a step, right?" Her father smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "That's more than I could have hoped for." As Jada left her father's house that day, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The road to healing was still long, but she was no longer walking it alone. She had her father, her new friends, and the unwavering support of Mr. Caldwell. For the first time in years, Jada felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, and that was enough. The following weeks after her conversation with her father felt like a quiet turning point for Jada. She had taken a huge step forward in her journey, and yet, something still weighed on her. She had forgiven him, or at least begun to, and they were slowly rebuilding a relationship, but the uncertainty of what that future would look like still lingered. She found herself wondering if she could ever truly trust him again, if their connection could become something lasting. But she was learning that healing wasn't linear, that it took time. As Jada continued to process everything, life around her began to shift. School had been a much easier place for her lately. The kids in her class were beginning to treat her like they would anyone else. The whispers had quieted, the stares had faded, and now, when she walked through the hallways, she wasn't just the quiet girl in the back of the room anymore. She was a part of the group. Emma had continued to be her steady companion, encouraging her to try new things, join in on group activities, and embrace the life she was building here. For the first time in a long while, Jada felt like she had a place in the world, a sense of belonging. Her confidence was growing, and though there were still moments of doubt, she was learning to stand up for herself. It was one evening, as the seasons were starting to change and the first cool breezes of autumn rolled in, that Jada received a call from her father. She had been expecting it, though she wasn't sure why. Her father had been respectful of her boundaries, never pushing her, but reaching out every now and then, checking in to see how she was. The call was short but filled with warmth. "I know you've been busy with school," he said, "but I wanted to see if you might want to get together soon. Maybe for lunch? No pressure, of course. Just a chance to talk again, if you're ready. She had been waiting for this moment. Jada had thought a lot about where she stood with her father, what their relationship was becoming. She had forgiven him, but that didn't mean she knew exactly what their future would look like. I think I'm ready, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Let's meet tomorrow. The next day, they met at a small cafe by the river, a peaceful place where the sounds of the water flowing gently over rocks made everything feel just a little more serene. As Jada sat down at the table with her father, she felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The tension that had accompanied their earlier meetings was gone. They weren't fully healed, but they were building something new together, a connection that was slowly growing stronger. The conversation started casually, with her father asking about her school, her friends, and the things that were important to her. Jada talked about her favorite classes and how much she had started to enjoy art again, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She had always loved to draw, but it was something she had put aside for years, not believing it mattered. I'm starting to draw again, she said, her eyes brightening. It feels good. It's like a part of me that I didn't know I'd lost is coming back. Her father smiled, a soft, proud smile. I'm glad to hear that, Jada. I've always believed you had a special talent. You should never stop doing the things you love. Jada looked at him, her heart swelling with an emotion she didn't know how to name. There was something comforting about being able to talk to him again, about feeling like she could open up to him without fear. She wasn't sure how long it would take, but she was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, there was room for him in her life after all. As they ate, they spoke more about the past, about what had happened, about the mistakes they both had made, and about the years that had been lost. Her father listened, really listened, as Jada shared her feelings. And in turn, he apologized again, not just for leaving, but for not realizing how deeply his absence had hurt her. I know I can't change the past, he said, his voice full of regret. But I want you to know that I'll always be here, Jada. I won't let you down again. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Jada felt herself believe them. Not because they erased the years of hurt, but because she saw the sincerity in his eyes. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't a magical fix, but it was a step forward. After lunch, they walked together by the river, the cool breeze brushing against their skin. Jada didn't feel the weight of her past hanging over her like she had before. It wasn't that she had forgotten what happened or that the scars had disappeared. It was just that she had begun to accept them as part of who she was, part of the story that had led her here. I'm glad we're doing this, Jada said, her voice quiet but content. I'm glad we're trying. Her father nodded, a soft chuckle escaping his lips. Me too. It's a start, Jada. That's all we can do. As they reached the end of their walk, her father gave her a tentative hug. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a magical moment where everything was fixed, but it was real. It was a moment of connection, of understanding, and of moving forward. For the first time, Jada felt like she wasn't just carrying her past. She was learning to carry it with grace, and that was enough. When they parted ways, Jada felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She wasn't sure where the future would take her, whether it would lead to a deep, lasting relationship with her father or whether they would always remain somewhat distant. But she knew that she had found something important, the strength to heal, to forgive, and to open herself up to the possibility of connection. She had taken a leap of faith, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like it was worth it. The days after Jada's reunion with her father felt like a mixture of hope and fear, a quiet tug-of-war between her past and the future she was still learning to embrace. Though she had made peace with her decision to reconnect, there were moments, late at night or in the quiet of the mornings, when doubts crept in. Could she truly build something with her father after all these years? Or was it just a fragile illusion that would fall apart like everything else in her life had before? She spent her days focusing on school, her friends, and the time she spent with Mr. Caldwell and Claire. Their support was steady, a constant presence she could rely on as she worked through the emotional complexities of rebuilding a relationship with the man who had once abandoned her. Life wasn't perfect, but it was beginning to feel like it was on the right track. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Jada's phone buzzed. She checked it to find a text message from her father. It was simple, but the words stopped her in her tracks. I'm proud of you, Jada. I know things aren't perfect, but I'm here. I'll always be here for you. The message was a quiet reminder of how much she had changed, how much she had grown. She had gone from a girl filled with anger and resentment to someone who was slowly learning to heal, to trust again. She wasn't the same person she had been when they first met. And her father wasn't the same either. She couldn't erase the past, but maybe, just maybe, she could start to build a future with him. That night, Jada sat in her room, staring at the text message over and over again. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a call. She hesitated, but then answered. "Hey, Jada." Her father's voice came through, warm and familiar. "I was wondering if you'd like to come over this weekend. Maybe we could do something together, just the two of us." Jada swallowed hard, her thoughts spinning. It had been a while since they had done anything just the two of them, and the idea felt a little overwhelming. She still wasn't sure what their relationship was supposed to look like. But in that moment, she realized she was ready to take another step forward. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I'd like that." The weekend arrived, and Jada found herself in front of her father's house again, standing on the same porch where they had first met. This time, there was no apprehension, no nervousness. Instead, she felt a sense of calm, of acceptance. He greeted her with a smile and a hug, and it was different this time. It wasn't forced or awkward. It was natural. They spent the day together, walking through the neighborhood, talking about everything and nothing. They didn't dive into the heavy stuff, the past that had kept them apart for so long. Instead, they enjoyed the present, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. It was like a new beginning, a fresh start in a relationship that had once seemed impossible. As they sat down to dinner, her father looked at her with a soft smile. "I know I've made a lot of mistakes, Jada," he said, his voice low and sincere. "But I want you to know that I'm here now. I want to be here, and I'm going to do my best to make up for all the lost time." Jada looked at him, her heart filled with emotions she hadn't been able to express before. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that he could change, that they could build something together. But it wasn't going to be easy. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for everything," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But I want to try. I want to give this a chance." Her father's eyes softened, and for a moment, there was a quiet understanding between them. "That's all I can ask for," he said, "and I'll wait as long as it takes." The evening passed quietly, the conversation flowing naturally. Jada realized that, for the first time, she wasn't holding on to the past. She wasn't holding on to the anger, the resentment. She was learning to accept her father as he was, flaws and all, and maybe, just maybe, he was learning to accept her too. When the night came to an end, her father walked her to the door, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "I'm glad you came tonight, Jada," he said. "I'm glad we're doing this." She smiled, her heart full of gratitude. "Me too," she whispered. As she stepped outside, Jada felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She wasn't sure where this new chapter with her father would lead, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer afraid. She had taken the first steps toward healing, toward building something real with him, and that was enough for now. She wasn't defined by her past anymore. She was learning to create her own future, one step at a time. As the weeks passed, Jada began to feel like she was living a life that was hers, one she was building from the ground up. The connection with her father, although still fragile, was beginning to take root. They met regularly, always carefully navigating their conversations, not pushing too hard, but making steady progress. There were days when Jada felt like it wasn't enough, that the gaps in their relationship were too wide to bridge, but there were other days when the moments of connection, however small, made her believe that maybe things could improve. The days were becoming a blend of routine and discovery, the pieces of her new life fitting together bit by bit. Jada continued to grow in school, thriving in ways she hadn't expected. She made new friends, some of whom had become like family to her. Emma was still her constant, always there with a kind word or a laugh to lift her spirits. It wasn't just about schoolwork anymore. It was about finding her place in the world, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged. Yet, despite the strides she was making, something still weighed on her. She had started to realize that her past, while something she couldn't change, was still something that shaped who she was. And even though she was making peace with her father, there were moments when she still felt like the girl who had been left behind. One evening, after a particularly long day at school, Jada sat in her room, staring out the window. The city lights sparkled in the distance, a sea of tiny points that seemed so far away. She didn't know what had brought on the wave of emotion that hit her, but it came crashing over her like a storm. She didn't want to feel weak, but she couldn't ignore the ache inside her anymore. Her father's presence in her life was still new, still uncertain. She wasn't sure where they were headed, but there were times when the weight of all that had been lost felt like it might swallow her whole. As she sat there, thinking about all the things she had been through, the knock at her door startled her. It was Mr. Caldwell. She opened the door to find him standing there, his expression kind but concerned. "Can I come in?" he asked gently. Jada nodded, and he stepped inside, sitting down beside her on the bed. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there with her in the quiet of her room. He had become someone she could turn to without hesitation, someone who always knew when she needed space and when she needed someone to talk to. After a few moments, Mr. Caldwell spoke. "You're carrying a lot, Jada," he said softly. "And I know you're trying to handle everything on your own. But you don't have to. I'm here. And so are the people who care about you." Jada swallowed hard, blinking back the tears that threatened to spill. She hadn't realized how much she had been bottling up inside until now. She wasn't sure what to say, but she felt something shift inside her. It was like the walls she had built around herself, the walls that had kept everyone at a distance, were starting to come down. "I'm scared," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm scared that everything will fall apart, that I'll let people down, that I'll always be that girl who doesn't belong." Mr. Caldwell didn't say anything right away. He simply put a hand on her shoulder, offering a silent gesture of comfort. "It's okay to be scared, Jada," he said finally. "But that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human, and it means you're learning to trust again. And that's something you should be proud of." Jada nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. She had been so afraid of letting people in, of feeling vulnerable, but the truth was, she didn't have to do it alone. She had people who cared about her, who were willing to stand by her side. And as much as she wanted to push them away sometimes, she was realizing that maybe that was okay. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be real. The next day, Jada met with her father again. They had agreed to meet at the same cafe by the river where they had spoken before. This time, it was different. Jada felt a sense of calm as she walked in, ready to face the next step in their relationship. Her father was already sitting at their usual table, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. He stood up as she approached, offering a gentle smile. "It's good to see you," he said, his voice warm. "How have you been?" Jada sat down, feeling a little nervous but also more open than before. "I've been okay," she said, her voice steady. "It's been a lot, but I'm learning." Her father nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know I haven't been the father you needed, and I can't change that. But I want to do better, Jada. I want to be someone you can count on." Jada looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, she saw the man who was trying. She saw his flaws, his mistakes, but she also saw his willingness to make amends. "I'm trying too," she said softly. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely, but I'm starting to. And I think that's all I can do right now." Her father reached across the table, his hand resting on hers. "That's more than I could have hoped for," he said, his voice full of emotion. "We'll take it one day at a time, Jada. And I'll be here, no matter what." Jada smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real. And for the first time, she felt like she was ready to move forward, ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. As they finished their coffee and walked out of the cafe together, Jada realized that healing wasn't just about forgiving others, it was about forgiving herself. She had spent so long carrying the weight of her past, but now, she was finally learning to let it go, one step at a time. The days after their meeting at the cafe felt like a new chapter, but it wasn't without its challenges. Jada felt the changes in herself, in the way she was learning to let go of the past and embrace the possibilities of her future. But even as she made strides forward, she could feel the weight of her father's absence in her life slowly being replaced by something else, something unfamiliar and, at times, unsettling. She was trying to build a relationship with him, but it wasn't easy. Old habits and emotions were hard to shake off. There were moments when her doubts crept back in, questioning whether she was doing the right thing, whether she could truly trust him. But there were also moments when the connection between them felt real, when she saw the sincerity in his eyes and heard the vulnerability in his voice. They were building something together, but it wasn't going to be quick or easy. One evening, after a particularly emotional conversation with her father about their shared past, Jada found herself back at the same oak tree in the yard, her favorite spot to think and reflect. It had become her place of peace, the place where she went when the noise of the world became too overwhelming. She sat on the grass, her sketchbook resting on her lap as she stared up at the stars. The breeze was cool, the night quiet, and for a moment, she allowed herself to simply breathe. She heard footsteps approaching and looked up to see Mr. Caldwell walking toward her. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside her, the two of them watching the sky together. "I'm proud of you, Jada," Mr. Caldwell said softly after a long silence. "You've come so far." Jada didn't answer right away. She was still processing everything, the weight of her decisions, the doubts that had once filled her heart. But in that moment, she realized something. She wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. It wasn't that everything had been fixed. It wasn't that her life was perfect. But she had found a sense of peace in herself that she hadn't known before. "It's been hard," she said finally, her voice quiet. "But I think I'm starting to believe that I can actually move forward." Mr. Caldwell smiled, his gaze full of warmth and understanding. "You've always had the strength, Jada. You've always had it inside you. You just needed to believe in it." She smiled faintly, feeling the truth of his words sink in. She had spent so long doubting herself, doubting whether she could truly be happy again. But now, she was starting to see a different future. A future where she could heal, where she could create something new, where she could move past the mistakes of the past. But there was still one thing hanging over her. One question she had to answer for herself. Could she truly forgive her father? Could she accept him into her life without feeling the weight of everything he had done? The next day, as Jada was walking home from school, she received a text message from her father. It was simple but meaningful. "I'm here if you want to talk, Jada. No pressure. Just know that I'm thinking about you." She stood still for a moment, her fingers hovering over the screen, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't that she didn't want to talk to him. She had made peace with their relationship, but there was still a part of her that held back, unsure of what this new version of their connection would look like. She wasn't ready to let go of the past completely, but she was ready to try. After a few moments, she typed back, "I'd like to talk." They arranged to meet at the same cafe, and Jada found herself standing outside, the cool air brushing her skin. When her father arrived, he greeted her with a hesitant smile, his eyes searching hers for any sign of discomfort. Jada's heart raced as she stepped forward. It was time. She had made the decision to move forward with him, but this meeting would be the real test. "Hey," her father said softly, his voice gentle. "How are you?" She took a deep breath. "I'm okay," she said, her voice steady. "I've been thinking a lot. About everything." They sat down together, and the conversation started slowly, as it always did with them. They spoke about the past, the things that had happened, the mistakes that had been made. Her father was open, vulnerable in a way he hadn't been before, admitting how much he had failed her and how deeply he regretted it. Jada listened, her heart heavy with emotion. She hadn't realized how much she had needed this. Needed to hear him say the things she had always wished he would. "I know I can't change the past," he said, his voice breaking, "but I want you to know that I'm here now. I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me. I'm not going anywhere." Jada looked at him, her emotions swirling. She had heard these words from him before, but this time they felt different. This time, she could see the sincerity in his eyes. It wasn't going to erase the years of hurt, but maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild something together. "I'm still angry," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And I'm still not sure if I can ever forgive you for everything." Her father nodded, his expression one of understanding. "I don't expect you to," he said quietly. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'll be here, no matter what." Jada felt the weight of his words, the truth of what he was saying sinking in. She wasn't ready to forgive him yet, but she realized something in that moment. She didn't have to forgive him all at once. She could take it one step at a time. And with that realization, she felt a shift inside her, a sense of release. It wasn't about letting go of the past in an instant. It was about allowing herself to move forward, step by step, at her own pace. As they finished their coffee, her father looked at her with a quiet hope in his eyes. "Thank you for giving me a chance, Jada," he said softly. Jada smiled, a small but meaningful smile. "It's not all fixed," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of acceptance and hope. But it's a start. And with that, they both walked out into the cool evening, ready to face whatever came next, together. For the first time in a long time, Jada felt like she was not just surviving, but beginning to truly live again. The weeks that followed were filled with more small moments of progress. Jada's relationship with her father continued to grow, but it was clear that both of them were still learning how to navigate this new dynamic. There were still uncomfortable silences, but there were also moments of understanding, moments when they could just be in each other's presence without the weight of the past hanging over them. Jada wasn't sure what the future held for her and her father, but she was starting to feel like the pieces of their relationship were fitting together, slowly but surely. School continued to be a place where she found herself blossoming. She had come so far from the quiet, isolated girl who had first stepped into the classroom. Now, she laughed with her friends, raised her hand to answer questions, and participated in group projects without feeling like an outsider. Emma remained her closest friend, and the two of them spent their afternoons together, sometimes studying, other times just enjoying each other's company. They had become a team of sorts, and Jada had begun to feel a sense of belonging that she hadn't thought possible just months before. But despite all the progress she had made, Jada still struggled with the feeling that she was constantly on the verge of losing everything. The fear of abandonment, the fear that things would fall apart, still haunted her. It wasn't something that went away overnight. One evening, as Jada sat in her room reading, she heard a knock on the door. It was her father. He had been trying to get in touch more regularly, but tonight, there was something different in his demeanor. He looked a little more serious than usual, a little more distant. "Jada, can we talk for a minute?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Jada closed her book and nodded, sitting up. "Sure, Dad. What's going on?" He sat down next to her on the bed, his hands clasped in his lap. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice wavering slightly. Jada felt a sudden tightness in her chest. She had learned to trust him again, but this moment felt different. She couldn't help but feel that something was coming, something that might disrupt the fragile peace they had been building. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He took a deep breath, his gaze shifting to the floor. "I know I've been working hard to be a part of your life again, and I know I've promised that I'm here for you. But I've been offered a job opportunity, a chance to move out of state. It's a big opportunity, and it could change everything for me." Jada's heart skipped a beat. "So you're leaving?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "No, not yet," he said quickly, reaching out to take her hand. "But I needed to tell you, because I want you to know that if I go, I'll always keep in touch. I'm not abandoning you again, Jada. I promise. But I need you to know that this is something I have to seriously consider. It's a chance for me to do better, to provide more for both of us." Jada sat in stunned silence. She had known that her father had been rebuilding his life, but she hadn't expected him to face a decision like this so soon. She had just started to believe that maybe they could build something, and now, the possibility of him leaving felt like the rug was being pulled out from under her. "I don't want you to leave," Jada said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't want to go back to what it was like before. I don't know if I can handle that again." Her father's face softened, and he gently squeezed her hand. "I don't want that either, Jada. I want to be here for you. But this is something I need to think about. It's a big decision, and I want you to know that I'll be here for you no matter what happens." Jada felt a lump form in her throat. The last few months had been the most stable she had ever felt, and the thought of losing that stability, even for a while, was terrifying. She had come so far, and now, the fear of losing it all made her feel like she was back at square one. "I just need some time to think," she said quietly, pulling her hand away and folding her arms across her chest. Her father nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get it. You take all the time you need, Jada. I'm not going anywhere, at least not yet. I just wanted to be honest with you about what's coming." As he stood up to leave, he turned back to her one last time. "You know where to find me," he said with a small, reassuring smile. Jada nodded, but as he left the room, she felt a sense of dread wash over her. She wasn't ready to face this new challenge. She had spent so much time healing, so much time rebuilding, and now the fear of losing it all threatened to undo everything. The next few days felt like a blur. Jada went through the motions of school and spending time with her friends, but her mind was constantly on her father's decision. She couldn't escape the fear that she had been so foolish to believe that things would stay the same. It was a sinking feeling, a constant weight on her chest. But then, one evening, as she sat alone in the living room, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her father. "I've decided not to take the job. I've thought a lot about it, and I don't want to risk losing the connection we've started to rebuild. I want to be here for you, Jada. Always." Jada's heart skipped a beat as she read the message. She felt a flood of emotions, relief, gratitude, and even a sense of disbelief. It was a decision that would change everything, but for once, it was a decision that wasn't based on running away. Her father was staying. She wasn't alone. And in that moment, Jada realized something. This was the beginning of the life she had always wanted. She was no longer a victim of her circumstances. She was in control of her future, and whatever came next, she knew she could handle it. For the first time in a long time, Jada felt hope. Real, lasting hope. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she was no longer afraid of it. The days after her father's decision to stay felt like a fresh beginning for Jada. There was a sense of calm that had been missing for so long, as though the chaos and uncertainty that had once ruled her life were finally starting to fade away. Her father's choice to remain in town was a monumental shift, not just for him, but for their relationship and for Jada's own sense of stability. The fear that had always been at the back of her mind, that one day he would leave again, or that everything they had started to rebuild would collapse, seemed to dissipate with each passing day. But as much as she wanted to believe that everything was fine now, Jada knew there were still many more steps to take. Her trust, though slowly growing, wasn't fully restored. It would take time, and Jada was learning that healing was never a straight line. Her days at school had continued to be a source of strength. She found herself more confident than ever before. She had finally found her place among her classmates, her friendships growing stronger with each passing day. Emma, her closest friend, continued to stand by her side, and together they had become a team, laughing through the challenges of school life, sharing jokes, and supporting each other through the ups and downs. Jada felt as though she was slowly putting together the puzzle of her life, piece by piece. There were still moments of doubt, still times when the old fears crept back in, but she had learned to push them aside. One afternoon, after school, Jada received a message from her father, asking if she could come over to his house later that evening. She didn't know what to expect, but something inside her told her it was important. She told Emma she would be heading to her father's house, and after a brief walk, she arrived at the familiar front door. Her father greeted her with a warm smile, and as they sat down in the living room, Jada noticed that there was something different about him today. His expression was more serious, more thoughtful than usual. "Jada," he began, his voice slightly hesitant, "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about where I stand in your life, and where we go from here." Jada felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. It wasn't that she didn't want to hear what he had to say, but the weight of his words felt heavy. "What do you mean?" she asked, her heart beating a little faster. Her father took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I know we've made progress, but I also know that there's more to do. I want to be a real part of your life, Jada. I don't want to be someone who's just here and there, or someone who's not really present. I know I've been absent for a long time, and I can't change that. But I want to change what comes next." Jada felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean by that?" she asked quietly. Her father looked at her, his eyes filled with emotion. "I've been thinking about what kind of father I want to be, what kind of relationship I want to have with you. And I know that if I really want to be there for you, I need to be more consistent. I need to show you that I'm here for the long haul." Jada absorbed his words, her heart filled with a mixture of emotions: hope, fear, uncertainty. This was everything she had wanted to hear from him, and yet, a small part of her still wondered if it was enough. Could she really trust him this time? Could she believe in the promises he was making? "I'm not asking for everything to be perfect," he continued, noticing her hesitation. "But I'm asking for the chance to prove myself, to show you that I'm here for you, no matter what, that I want to be the kind of father you deserve." Jada's heart ached as she looked at him. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this was real, but her fears still lingered. She had been let down before, and the idea of putting herself in a position to be hurt again was something she wasn't sure she was ready for. "I don't know," she whispered, looking down at her hands. "I'm scared that it won't last, that I'll just end up being disappointed again." Her father's expression softened, and he reached across the table to take her hand. I understand, he said quietly. And I'm not asking you to give me your trust all at once. I'm asking you to let me prove that I can be a part of your life. I can't fix the past, but I can try to be the father you need going forward. Jada felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, not wanting to let him see her vulnerability. But the truth was, this moment was everything she had been waiting for, everything she had been afraid to believe in. I'll try, she said softly, her voice shaky. But it's going to take time. I don't know how long it will take for me to feel like I can trust you completely again. Her father nodded, a deep understanding in his eyes. I know, and I'm not rushing you. I'm just asking for the chance to be here. For you. Jada took a deep breath and nodded slowly. The fear was still there, still lurking in the background, but something in her told her that maybe this was the right step. Okay, she said, her voice firmer now. Let's take it one step at a time. They both smiled. At each other, a quiet understanding passing between them. It wasn't the perfect resolution, and it wasn't the end of their journey, but it was a step in the right direction. Jada felt something in her shift, a small but powerful release of the weight she had been carrying. She wasn't ready to fully trust him yet, but she was willing to try. And that was enough for now. As they finished their conversation, Jada realized that she wasn't just healing her relationship with her father. She was healing herself. She was learning to trust, to forgive, and to embrace the future with hope instead of fear. It was slow, it was difficult, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Jada felt like she was on the right path. The days that followed their conversation felt like a quiet sort of progress for Jada. She had taken another important step in her journey with her father, and while things weren't perfect, they were better. Slowly but surely, the relationship they were building was becoming more real. There were still moments of doubt, moments when she wasn't sure if she could trust him completely, but there were also moments when she saw the sincerity in his eyes, when she realized that he was trying. It wasn't going to be an easy road, but it was a road they were walking together, step by step. School had become a place where Jada continued to thrive. She had made more friends, some of whom had become like family to her. Emma was still her closest friend, always by her side, sharing laughter and supporting her through the ups and downs. Jada's confidence had grown, and she was starting to see herself in a new light. She wasn't just the girl who had been abandoned and left behind. She was someone who had overcome so much and was still learning how to embrace her future. But even as she grew stronger, Jada still carried the weight of her past, the fear that things would fall apart again. It wasn't just her father's presence in her life that scared her, it was the uncertainty of everything. Could she really trust that her life wouldn't crumble under the weight of the next challenge? One evening, as Jada sat in her room, she felt a deep sense of unease. She had been doing well, but tonight, the fear of losing control crept in, and she couldn't shake it. She had been doing everything she could to move forward, to heal, but what if it wasn't enough? What if something would happen to break the fragile peace she had fought so hard to find? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from her father. I know things have been difficult, but I'm here. Whenever you're ready to talk, I'm ready to listen. Just know that you're not alone. The words hit Jada in a way she didn't expect. It wasn't just that her father was reaching out again. It was the reminder that he was there, that he cared. And for the first time, Jada felt the weight of her emotions. She wasn't sure what to do with them, but she knew that this was part of the process, learning to let people in, learning to trust again. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words, how much she needed to know that her father wasn't going anywhere. That evening, she found herself sitting in the living room with Mr. Caldwell, her mind racing with the uncertainty of it all. Mr. Caldwell had been a steady presence in her life, and his support had meant everything to her. He had been the one constant when everything else had felt so unstable. As they sat together, Jada looked at him, her heart heavy with the questions she hadn't been able to voice. I don't know what to do with all this, Mr. Caldwell, she said, her voice trembling. I'm scared. I'm scared that everything I've been trying to build will just fall apart again. Mr. Caldwell turned to her, his eyes filled with understanding. It's okay to be scared, Jada, he said gently. But that doesn't mean you're not making progress. It's not about being perfect or having everything figured out. It's about taking the next step, even when you're unsure. It's about trusting yourself and knowing that you're capable of handling whatever comes next. Jada took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. She had spent so much of her life trying to control everything, trying to protect herself from the hurt and disappointment that had followed her. But she was learning that sometimes it was okay to let go of the control, to let things unfold. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't something that came naturally, but she was learning to trust herself more. Later that evening, Jada made the decision to reach out to her father. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that she wasn't going to move forward by holding back. She wanted to keep building their relationship, but she also knew that it required vulnerability, a willingness to be open to the unknown. The next day, she sent him a message. "I'm ready to talk. I'm ready to take the next step with you." Her father's reply came quickly. "I'm so proud of you, Jada. I'll be here when you're ready to meet. Take all the time you need, but know that I'm waiting." Jada sat back, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She wasn't sure what the next step looked like, but she knew that it didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be real. The following weekend, Jada met her father again, this time in a park near his house. It was a quiet, peaceful spot, with trees lining the edges and a small lake shimmering in the distance. It felt like a fresh start, a place where they could continue the process of rebuilding. As they walked along the path, her father spoke first. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he said softly. "And I want to be honest with you, Jada. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, and I know that it's going to take time for you to fully trust me again. But I'm willing to put in the work. I want to be a part of your life, and I want to prove that I'm here for the long haul." Jada looked at him, her heart full of conflicting emotions. She wasn't sure if she was ready to fully forgive him, but she was ready to try. She was ready to let him be a part of her life, even if it meant taking things one step at a time. "I'm not sure what this will look like," she said, her voice steady but filled with vulnerability. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to let you back in." Her father smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made Jada's heart swell. "That's all I can ask for, Jada. And I'll be here every step of the way, no matter what." As they walked side by side, Jada felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't all resolved, but it was real. They were moving forward, together, and that was enough. It had been several months since Jada had made the decision to rebuild her relationship with her father. Slowly but surely, the pieces of their connection were falling into place. It wasn't always smooth sailing, and there were still moments when the past would creep up, testing their progress. But the growth was undeniable. They were learning how to navigate the complexities of their relationship, one step at a time. And with each passing day, Jada felt a little less like the scared, lost girl she had once been, and a little more like someone who was in control of her future. Her life at school had continued to improve. She felt more confident, not just in herself, but in the people around her. Emma had become a true friend, and Jada found herself able to open up in ways she hadn't been able to before. It wasn't just about schoolwork or friendships anymore. It was about carving out a space where she could be herself. A space where she felt safe, where she wasn't afraid of being let down. Still, despite all the progress, the fear of loss was something that haunted her. She had lost so much already, her mother, her father, and the trust she had once had in people. The thought that she could lose the stability she had finally found, even with her father, still kept her on edge. It wasn't that she didn't trust him, but the fear of losing him, of him letting her down again, lingered in the back of her mind. She hadn't realized how much she had been holding on to that fear until one quiet evening, when she found herself sitting alone in the kitchen. The house was still, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the refrigerator. It was then that she received a call from her father. It wasn't an unusual occurrence. They had been keeping in touch regularly. But tonight, something about his voice made Jada feel uneasy. "Jada, can we talk?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. "Sure. What's up?" she replied, trying to keep her tone casual. "I've been offered a job," he said after a long pause. "It's a great opportunity, and it would mean that I'd have to move. It's a good job, one I've been wanting for a while, but I wanted to talk to you about it before making any decisions." Jada's heart skipped a beat. The possibility of her father leaving again, after everything they had worked through, was a thought she wasn't prepared to handle. She had come so far, but the fear of him walking away again flooded her mind. "You're thinking about leaving?" she asked, her voice betraying the panic she was feeling. No, he rushed to say. "I'm not saying I'm leaving, Jada. I just wanted to be open with you. I've been thinking about it, and I didn't want to make this decision without your input." She felt a sense of relief, but also a weight settle on her chest. She had learned to trust him again, but this new reality, where decisions were still being made without her, felt like a step backward. "I don't want to go through that again," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to lose you again. I don't know if I can handle that." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when her father spoke again, his voice was filled with sincerity. "I understand, Jada. I really do. And I want you to know that I'm not making any decision that could hurt you. This job, it's a big opportunity, but it's not more important than you. I want you to know that. If it means staying here with you, then that's what I'll do. I've already made up my mind." Jada blinked back tears, a flood of emotions washing over her. It wasn't the job that mattered. It was his presence in her life. For the first time, she realized that her father wasn't just trying to make up for the past. He was making a conscious choice to be there for her now, in the present. "I don't want you to make decisions for me," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I want you to do what's best for you. But I don't want to be left behind again." Her father's voice softened. "I know, Jada, and that's why I'm telling you. I'm staying. I'm here for you." Jada felt the weight she had been carrying lift just a little. The fear was still there, but it wasn't as heavy as before. She wasn't ready to let go of her doubts, but she was ready to trust him again. Slowly, but surely, she was learning to let go of the fear of losing him. The next day, Jada felt lighter. She had made a choice to allow herself to trust, to believe that her father was really here for her, and that he wasn't going anywhere. She knew it wouldn't be easy. They still had a long road ahead of them, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. She walked through her day at school with a sense of peace she hadn't felt before. She smiled more, laughed more, and, for the first time, really felt like she belonged. Later that evening, when she came home, her father was waiting for her in the living room. "I'm glad we had that talk," he said, his eyes soft with understanding. "I know I've messed up before, but I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere this time." Jada nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I know," she said quietly, "and I'm glad you're staying." For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of the past holding her back. She didn't feel like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was moving forward, and so was her relationship with her father. The road was still long, but it was theirs to walk together. And for the first time in a long time, Jada felt hopeful. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she was finally finding her place in the world. As time passed, Jada continued to grow, not just in the world of school and friendships, but in her relationship with herself and her father. The bond between them had slowly solidified, one conversation at a time. They still had a long road ahead of them, but for the first time, Jada wasn't afraid to take each step. She had learned to forgive, to trust, and to embrace the future with a sense of hope she had once thought was impossible. The days were filled with laughter, shared moments, and the quiet understanding that even though their past could never be erased, their future was something they could shape together. Her school life continued to flourish as well. Jada found herself excelling in art, something that had once been her escape, and now had become a true passion. Her friendships deepened, and Emma remained her closest ally, the one person who had been there for her when no one else had. Together, they shared their hopes, fears, and dreams for the future, and Jada realized just how much she had missed out on by keeping herself hidden for so long. Emma was always there to remind her that the past didn't define who she was now, and that she was deserving of every happiness she could find. On weekends, Jada spent time with her father, doing simple things like walking in the park, having lunch together, and talking about life. No longer carrying the burden of anger, but filled with an openness that felt liberating. Her father wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But together, they were building something real, something worth holding on to. One Sunday afternoon, after a walk, her father turned to her, his expression serious but warm. "Jada," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about what's come next for both of us. You've grown so much, and I've learned so much about myself, too. I'm proud of what we've been able to build, but I also know that this is just the beginning." Jada smiled softly, her heart swelling with the truth in his words. It wasn't the perfection of their relationship that mattered, but the fact that they were both willing to keep trying. "I've been thinking about it too," Jada replied. "I'm not saying everything's perfect, but I think we've both learned that it's okay to take things one step at a time. We don't have to have all the answers." Her father nodded, a tear glistening in his eye. "I'm here for you, Jada. And I always will be, no matter what comes next." The words, simple yet profound, echoed in Jada's heart. She had learned to trust again, and she realized that the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. The two of them spent that day together, just like they always had, but with a deeper understanding of what it meant to be family. Jada had learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for each other, no matter the mistakes or challenges. As the seasons changed and time continued its steady march forward, Jada's life blossomed in ways she hadn't thought possible. She was no longer the girl defined by her past, but someone who had learned to shape her own future. And as she stood in her room, looking at the sketch she had just finished, Jada realized how far she had come. The girl who once feared abandonment, rejection, and failure was now the woman who had embraced her worth, who knew that the future was hers to create. She didn't have to wait for things to be perfect. She could keep moving forward, trusting herself, trusting the people who cared about her, and knowing that every step, no matter how small, was part of her journey. And in that moment, Jada smiled, genuinely, fully, because for the first time in her life, she knew that everything she had been through had led her to this moment, a moment where she was finally able to live fully, to love fully, and to trust fully. She had found her place in the world, not by looking back at what was lost, but by looking forward, ready for whatever came next.